Hello guys, and welcome to the third part of my Morwaith suggestion. Today we are talking about the Southern Morwaith, and almost certainly won't have time for the Northern ones. So, we have limited time, so let's go right now. Let's go. No stopping, no further ados. Right, the Southern Morwaith are the biggest of the factions map-wise, so we've got a lot to do, especially considering the Northern Morwaith are super influenced by Harad. If you want to be playing a more pure Morwaith, this is going to be your biggest faction. Now, because there's a lot of map to talk about, I'm actually going to start with the map. And this one's a lot bigger, so we've actually got professional subtitles. So, 4 biomes, but we're starting with the Fertile Valley and Nan Hanagorath, because those are the two biggest ones. Also, yeah, I've got the wrong translation there, sorry. Nan Hanagorath is the first one. So it's pale green. It's not properly lush. It's almost there. It's got fairly unforested because the trees have been cut down. But there are a lot of trees that are there. Acacias and baobabs and bananas and mangoes. You know, they're both quite rare. And a brand new tree, the cola. Obviously from cola nuts. Which grow on the tree like cocoa beans, and when eaten would give an effect that slowly boosts hunger. Because the nuts are traditionally chewed, so you put them in your mouth and you chew them for a long time. And it's a pretty unique effect, so it's a big advantage because you don't have to worry about eating for a little bit. So that gives them some nice utility there. And there are 2 new ground plants, Blood of the Harnen, which is light blue dye, and a pink one, which I don't know what you'd call it, which adds some new dyes to Farharad and some new variety in the plants. They've also got some hippos, which would be imported from the east to fight the Tower Thrym, but they're pretty rare. They're not very common, but they're less common in the Fertile Valley, because obviously they're a combat mount and Nan Hanagorath is the big battle site. There'd also be a brand new mount. An elephant. No, it's not a Moomakill. It's not a Moomakill. Please don't ban me. It's an elephant, like African forest elephant kind of thing. It's about 2.5 blocks tall and is really important for all the progression around the Southern Morwaith. It's neutral and pretty tanky. Not hippo tanky, but does more damage than a hippo. They drop thick hide, elephant bones, and tusks. Small tusks. I've called them that in case Moomakill ever get added. All the standard grassland animals, with lions and gemsbok being a bit rarer, just so the wildlife feels a bit more distinct, and those two have very little to do with the faction and how it functions. Fertile Valley is like that, but turn it up. No very, very limited hippos, which keeps them from feeling like just the same biome. Elephants are more common. Zebras and gemsbok are slightly less common, because obviously if elephants are the mounts, then there's slightly less use for them. And lions are slightly more common than in Nan Hanagorath, because they're standard rate. More trees, but no acacias, because it's too wet and warm. Not warm. The flowers from Nan Hanagorath are also there, but an extra one would spawn in the Fertile Valley. And lakes and forest variants are quite common. Gates of Fire, there's not a lot to say, really. If the new rock gets added, then on a Southern crafting table, I'd like it to be bricks, pillars, stairs, that kind of thing. You know, you cross Southern Morwaith brick with it. That's about it. But there's a lot to say about the floodplains, because these are quite a complicated biome. So they've got reeds, sugarcanes, mud, clay, common 1 or 2 block deep ponds where you get floodwater stuck. It would still be slightly more like the plains than the swamp, but it's clearly, you know, the two had a kid and this was what happened, you know. It's the easiest way for the Morwaith to get swamp stuff. Now the Tower Thrym have the actual swamp. So stuff like sugarcane and mud, the Morwaith wouldn't be able to access anymore. So this is how they'd get it. There'd be a few trees here, willows, oaks, and a new one. I'm suggesting the swamp cottonwood, but you absolutely could have others there. And so the biomes variants are a bit weird, because there's the plain, the terrace, and the upland. And there's 2 variants for each. So, for example, you'd have plain standard or plain forest, terrace standard, terrace forest, and upland standard, upland forest. So plain, terrace, and upland determine how flooded everything is. So the plain is the lowest, it's very flat, it's very flooded, whereas the upland is a lot higher, it's kind of standard hill and much drier. So you get more reeds and mud in the plains, and the forest and a plains forest would have fewer trees than in the upland. A floodplain in general would have relatively few structures and Morwaith, except for the uplands, because it's not very livable for their style of life. But in the upland, it's similar numbers to the rest of the grassland. I'd like to see a new mob. You probably don't need one, but I think a crane or a heron, and maybe even another smaller bird, just a reskinned seagull or something, could work. It's not needed, but it makes it feel a lot more distinct. And I don't want another biome that's just filled with crocodiles, because there are a lot of those already, and we don't need another. So that's it for the map content for the Southern Morwaith. Quite a lot, but there's quite a lot of biomes. So, and now onto their equipment. They get 2 sets of armor, Southern Morwaith armor, which is made of thick hide from elephants and hippos, which is better than the Eastern set. It's basically your current set, pretty much, but it's got increased durability. The second set would be the Southern Chieftain Set, which requires all the standard set. So the helmet, you take the Southern Morwaith helmet, and you put 2 tusks from elephants. The chestplate, you take the Southern Morwaith chestplate and add the blood of the Harnen flower, which would be visible on the back. Boots need wooden planks to padded with wooden shielding, and the leggings get cola nuts, which glaze them, and it means you have to go through all the Fertile Valley content to access this set. It's a standard chieftain set, so it's just an aesthetic thing. It's exactly the same as the Eastern or Western Morwaith chieftain set, but it looks cooler. It looks cool and very different. The factions' weapons are fairly standard, with mace, axe, sword, dagger, spear, pike, bow. The melee weapons are basically the Eastern Morwaith set, but they're not the same. So the longer range weapons, the spear, the pike, and the sword, would be better than the Eastern Morwaith, and all the shorter range weapons, the mace, the axe, the dagger, and the dagger, would be much worse than the Eastern Morwaith set, because they're meant to be fighting at range, even in melee. So their bow is worse than the standard bow, but they're meant to be keeping at range in melee, not actually trying to have a shootout, because it draws slightly slower than your standard bow, but they do actually have a bow, and remember, it can use chain arrows, so it's still got its usefulness. And if you decide you'd rather have lower draw speed than lower damage, well, then maybe you'd prefer to use this one. The special weapon is the Elephant Spear, so this is a special weapon that they get, and it has that stat line. The range is the important part. It's the longest reach melee weapon in the game. But other than that, kind of sucks. It's very, very specialized. Generally, I imagine it would be pretty good in PvE, but useless in PvP. Absolutely appalling in PvP, because it would need massive knockback to even be useful. So you craft it in 3 parts. The shaft, so the shaft is crafted like this. So the bones are elephant bones. The nut is a cola nut. So you've got to experience some nice content. Then the handle, the lever is thick hide. The rock from the gates, the rock on either side of it from the gates of fire, and the wood is from the swamp cottonwood in the floodplains. So you've got to experience all these biomes to get to that point. And then you craft the blade like this. The horns are tusks, and the bones are and the bone is an elephant bone, which means it takes quite a long time to get all the parts, as tusks would be a fairly rare drop, And elephant spears would be impossible to find from traders. Well, almost impossible. They'd spawn very, very rarely and be super expensive. So the request to get them, and you've got to experience all the content. You've got to go to all the biomes, and that should draw them all together. So the south has lots of structures. Southern huts are just variants. So the Torafrim ruins are ruin variants of the Towerfrim structures, which don't spawn much in the floodplains, but spawn pretty much everywhere else. And then some more variants and farms, which spawn, just as farms rather than in villages like the Eastern Morwaith, so they can have a large yam farm along the lines of a Dorwinian vineyard. The Cola Orchard is an orchard with cola trees. This is to show off that they're the biggest agricultural faction. The Southern Morwaith Great Village is basically a town, which has a large circular wall around a massive village with a great meeting hall, which has 2 stories, and has a small military area, farm, chieftain's building, and all the rest. It's just a standard town, basically. Then you've got some more variants, and a hunting camp, which is it's a camp made for hunting. Beast chains could spawn there, but that's pretty much it. It's more like the beast chainer stuff. Beast chainer camps can spawn in the 2 fertile biomes, but obviously they are part of the Eastern Morwaith subfaction. They should sort of feel like the Morwaith subfaction you go to if you don't want to be in the Northern Morwaith, but you want the biggest, broadest subfaction. So, what have we got for Southern NPCs? Well, the Southern Morwaith, so some standard variants, then a Taskmaster, which sells farmhands, which is the only way for you to get a farmhand if you play the Morwaith, which is a Towerfrim slave. Then you get your warriors. You get a Southern Morwaith warrior who wears Southern Morwaith armor, standard stuff. Southern Morwaith hunter, which is just an archer. A zebra rider, a mounted archer, and then the pledge reward, a war elephant. So the Southern Morwaith war elephant is an elephant that has a saddle and 2 warriors. The guy on the front is just aesthetic. He's just there to be steering the elephant. When the elephant dies, he dies. He doesn't use weapons. He works as part of the elephant. But if the rider's killed, the elephant keeps attacking. The real rider uses an elephant spear. It doesn't drop ever, but it allows him the big enough range to hit people from how high up he is. And it is a massively expensive unit. Requires 400 alignment and pledging. So it's pretty hard to get, but super fun to use. And then you get a standard banner bearer. And that is it for the Southern Morwaith. That is all the stuff that the Southern Morwaith have to offer. And fortunately, I managed to talk through that fast enough that we actually have time to cover the Northern Morwaith in this video as well, so we can keep it down to 3. I'm proud of myself. So the Northern Morwaith are by far the most distinct of the subfactions because they're a cross between your standard Morwaith subfactions and the near Haradrim, because they're up north and trading with them a lot. So we're going to start with the map again. So the biome section was very detailed on the Northern, but we're going to make a few points. So the Southern hunting ground, the near Haradrim wildlife that I mentioned, are camels and horses that spawn there. The Gwaith Hekarad, so the buffalo that I mentioned for the Gwaith Hekarad, is a neutral mob. Stronger than your average horse-sized mob, but not as powerful as the elephant or hippo. It doesn't do much damage, but enough to mean that it's not nothing to kill. It drops buffalo hide, which is used to craft the Northern Morwaith armor. The Farharad Hot Hills are a brand new and very important plant. It's something fantastical because it's basically the Southern Amphalus. It's distilled in barrels to create Morwaith salve, which is basically an instant health potion. It restores a large amount of health depending on the strength, but it also gives an effect that prevents it being used again, which increases in length the more health you got out of it. And it's a super rare plant. But that Morwaith salve gives you your potion from the Morwaith. and the Lion's Grasslands. So I mentioned the Nimroa for this, and it's one of the most important new mobs. It's basically the northern equivalent of the elephant in how central it is to progression. So it's based on the European cave lion, so it's much larger than the lion in game, around half a block taller. It's paler, with whitish fur, no mane, and a longer snout. It spawns in dens, small caves that would contain them like a faction structure. They're hostile, have decent health, and do very high damage, and they're quite rare. They drop fur, hide, and teeth, all of which have uses. So the Northern Morwaith have 3 armor sets and 2 sets of weapons. So let's start with the most specialized, which is Nimroa hide armor. So Nimroa hide armor acts like Harad robed, preventing heat damage, but the chestplate and leggings give 1 protection each. So they actually give protection, but they're much harder to get than the robes. So it's quite a trade-off. Whereas the Northern Morwaith armor and so then you got the Northern Morwaith and Northern Morwaith Chieftain armor, standard stuff. Standard armor is crafted using bronze and buffalo hide, not Gemsbok hide, in the same pattern as the Harnen armor in Near Harad, which is equal to all the Harad sets, but has much worse durability, giving them the best set of armor, but with weak durability. So the Chieftain Armor takes away from the protection, but looks cooler. It's crafted by taking the standard armor and adding a Nimroa fur. Wearing a full set would give the player 1 level of strength, which allows you to basically play a berserker. This effect is true for all Chieftain sets, but this one's the best one because it gives you the highest level of protection. The first set of weapons are crafted on a Northern Morwaith crafting table using bronze and are equivalent to the Near Harad set, but with much worse durability. The second is a Nimroa Teeth set, which only has a spear, a dagger, and a battle axe. They do much higher damage than any of the standard weapons, with a slightly lower range and very poor durability. There'd also be a new Nimroa Tooth arrow, which would do 1 extra damage than the standard bow, but is only useful in Morwaith bows. So your Northern Morwaith, Southern Morwaith, and Eastern Morwaith bows, not only can you use your special chain arrows, you can also use your special Nimroa Tooth arrows, which help deal with the fact that all the Morwaith bows are pretty bad. You know, they're not super useful. It's not like the chain arrows where they're doing utility. But if you're determined to play with Morwaith equipment, it is a necessary fix for how weak your bows are, basically. So the Northern Morwaith also have a bow with high speed and low range. It's not a great bow, but it's not awful. And it helps Nimroa arrows because you're only doing 100% damage. Now, I do hope that they get a crossbow, but I think you could debate that either way, so I'm not going to talk about it in detail. But if they do get a crossbow, which I'd like them to do, then I think it should be pretty bad, and you don't get Nimroa arrows, so it's weak for that as well. So it's cool because the Morwaith have access to a crossbow, but it's not a very good crossbow. Now there's also sort of a third set, which can't be crafted or used, but can be sold at ridiculous prices to some of the Southron traders. These are the ancient Morwaith weapons, which is a dagger, a spear, a pike, and a sword, and we'll talk about how you do get them in just a minute. So, structures. We're not mentioning variants. They wouldn't have a town, and hunting shacks would be very common. A Southron hunting shack, which is a version of the hunting shack, but it's different enough that I have to mention it because it's near Harad rather than Morwaith. It's larger, it's made of Haradric woods, usually cedar, and it's the base of operations for a few Southron hunters who we'll talk about later. It's got some beds, weapons, animal products, and it only spawns in the Emin Heiharad and Southern hunting grounds. Then there's some more Southron variants, which are just hunting and trading outposts, so they're a load of the hunting shacks put together, basically. Morwaith mercenary camps, which are much larger versions of the ones found in Near Harad, because there's loads of them building up. A Northern Morwaith tower, which has 3 variants. In Gwaith Heiharad, they're short and stout, made of wood, and feature many soldiers. In the hunting grounds, tall, slim, and made of brick with fairly few soldiers. And in the arid grasslands, they're in between. And then there are Northern Morwaith shrines, which are small shrines to the sacred hills, They only spawn in Greath Heiharad and always face north toward the hills, as well as a small altar. A couple houses spawn here to defend the shrine. And then the Ancient Grave. Spawn only in the Farharad Hot Hills, an old burial site where once mighty chieftains have been buried. There's a gravestone, but below it are ancient riches and a new type of white. They also have all the standards. So a Morwaith white spawns when someone attempts to rob an ancient grave. It's a large white which carries an ancient Morwaith weapon and looks Morwaith. He deals extra heat damage whenever he hits, ignores armor, and inflicts wither. So basically, a super nasty white. He drops his weapon around half the time, has large amounts of coins, plus a miasma, which is an item you can get off him. It doesn't do anything, and is just there so you can brag that you took down the scary white. A Southern Hunter, which is a coastling or nomad NPC with a mix of Heraldric equipment and one of their bows, and can be hired at 50 near Herald alignment. A Southern Poaching Trader, trader variant of the Hunter, sells animal products. Southern Collector, which buys ancient weapons at super high prices, only spawns in the trader outpost. And then you've got your standard stuff, a standard civilian, trader, chieftain, and a warrior, archer, horseman, horse archer, and lower chieftain, which is your pledge reward, which wears chieftain armor, so has strength and uses Nimroa tooth weapons. It always has a melee weapon and no ranged ones, and much more expensive than the standard foot troops. So the difference here is you're using horses instead of zebras. It's not much of an advantage because the horses are quite slow and the horse armor isn't very good, but they're decent cavalry options that you can get fairly cheaply. And that is it for the Northern Morwaith. And that's it for the whole faction. That is it for the Morwaith suggestion. It's a huge suggestion. I think it comes out to about 10,000 words. But they're a new player's first encounter with Farharad, and they've got a fair amount of lore in the Lost Chronicles, so I'm hoping this will help make them a genuinely interesting faction with wide variety and real appeal, even for players who aren't necessarily going to engage with the faction, with stuff like the salve and chain arrows, which are like, you know, that unique, cool utility. All in all, I just hope this could help out the Morwaith in the overhaul that all of Farharad so desperately needs. And with that, I want to say a huge thank you to anyone who watched any of these videos. Just like the other two, this is going to have a link to the suggestion and the Lost Chronicles down in the description. So please, if you are someone who enjoyed it, go over there, comment your thoughts about it, both on the video and on the suggestion, and leave a like for the video and the suggestion too, because, you know, it would be really, really cool if some of this stuff did one day make it into the mod. With that, I will see you guys next time. Bye!